Hey, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. I just want to preface this video by saying I'm sorry that it took so long for me to make a second part to this video. I know the first part of this video was very different from the content that I usually make, so I just want to say thank you for the people that did watch that video and actually enjoyed and wanted to know more about this story. It was just something fun to do and kind of creative with. I find myself making a lot of content, obviously, for YouTube and its reaction videos, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that, and sometimes now that I'm so used to the process of listening to these songs, I can't help but like now overthink about them. So that's kind of like how this idea came to be, but I just wanted to come back on here and do the second part to turning Evermore into one cohesive short story. So if you haven't watched the first part and you're interested in it, I can link it below just because you really need to kind of watch that part in order to understand where we're going from here. But if you already know what we're talking about, you should be able to get right into the story, so we'll just kind of start off from where we left off. Preface, I literally wrote 6 pages of stuff worth. It is 2,600 words, so I didn't take this very lightly, so again, thank you for the people that did enjoy this. If we remember, we kind of left off right where the two characters that we know, Pat and Alice, they're kind of this like long-winded love story, I guess you could say, throughout time. This whole thing takes place over a couple years during like college and then post-college life. The last track that we left off on was Right Where You Left Me, and that was where, well, actually, I'll back up a little bit more and say that champagne problems happened where Pat did propose and it kind of just went wrong, if you remember. And then we moved into Right Where You Left Me, where it was, and then we moved into Right Where You Left Me, where it was just the catalyst for time passing. It encompasses the entire year of them being broken up. And I'll just read this one just to catch us up. Alice had found a way to continue on living with her life, but leaning into the college experience, Pat stays stagnant in almost every aspect. He's essentially frozen in time, which is like the person at the restaurant, help. And then Alice will return one day looking for the relationship that they once had. He's still 23 inside his fantasy. People in his life encourage him to change or try to move on, but all of this has failed attempts as Pat doesn't see a conceivable way to be happy again now that he's lost Alice. This all comes to a head when he sees Alice in town for Thanksgiving exactly 1 year later after their breakup, because he did propose in the Champagne Problems track the year prior, and she has someone new with her for this holiday. Alice doesn't actually notice him, but he sees them from afar, and this kind of destroys him even further, just because now he literally can't imagine moving on at all, even though she's out there moving on and she has kids in Christmas, but I'm unaware. She doesn't have children, but that's kind of like the song reference that I was going for. So now bringing up to the second part of this video, it is going to go with the next track, which is 'Tis the Damn Season. So let's just get straight into it. So over the next month between Thanksgiving and Christmas, if we remember, Thanksgiving is just where he saw Alice with another man in their hometown. So this is about a month later where Christmas holiday is now happening, and the idea of Alice moving on is destroying Pat. He is still yet to make any changes in his life, but he finally comes to the realization that she's never coming back to him. It is Christmas and Pat is preparing for another holiday of awkward looks from the family about his situation. Some are the stares of people feeling bad for him, while others are scowls for not being able to move on with his life like most people do. In my head, I feel like whenever the traumatic event happened for him last Thanksgiving, like that Christmas that happened right after that a year ago, people did feel bad because that was a brand new thing, but now it's almost exactly a year later and nothing has changed. So like some people still feel bad for him because, you know, he was so in love, but also some people are like, okay, you're young, you gotta figure this out. So that's kind of like what his situation is. And then I also put in, just because it's so true, to me at least, it's always the family members who don't know about your day-to-day life, which are the quick ones to judge. I don't know if everyone has that experience for their holidays, but it's always those people that just seem to have the loudest opinion about your life and what you're doing with it. But after the little lashes, Pat decides to leave the jolly holiday early in favor for a drive around town alone with his thoughts. So he has a truck, if that means anything. Misty as the truck, mud on your truck tires, whatever. That's a reference I'm going for here. But Pat decides to go to his favorite place to think, which is the park. Upon arrival, Pat becomes still with fear as he sees an all too familiar car parked next to his truck. He doesn't believe his eyes, but there stood Alice alone in the park between the Methodists and the school that used to be theirs. Look at these references. Pat and Alice have their first true in-person conversation in over a year since their breakup. They've only seen each other. The only other time they've seen each other was about a month ago when Pat saw Alice in town with someone else for the Thanksgiving holiday. After polite but like awkward introductions and a how's the weather kind of conversation, Pat is the first to ask how Alice has truly been. Alice puts on a fake smile and explains that despite her current sadness, she's happier than she's ever been. She explains that the holidays at home always find a way to bring her down, which kind of feels like the mood of "'Tis the Damn Season." At least that's what I've gotten out of it, so I feel like that's kind of why she has that thought process there. After some confusing looks, Alice knows that Pat is the one person who knows her just as much as she knows herself, and Pat thinks her story is bullshit. Alice can see how hurt Pat is still, but tries to avoid the topic. They catch up, and Alice shares stories while dancing around the fact that she's in fact in a new relationship. As they ride around in Pat's truck, Pat finally musters up the courage to ask who the person was that she brought home a month prior. She explains that it was, I don't have a name for the person, to be honest, so I'm trying to come up with something on the spot. I don't know, Brad. Let's just say it's Brad, I don't know. She explains that it was someone named Brad, and it was a new relationship that began in August, so about 4 months ago, and in hindsight, she believes that bringing him home for the holiday was somewhat premature. It was still kind of early in their relationship, but it was kind of like that situation where you're in where it's like, okay, well, we are together. I should maybe like introduce you to my family, but it's also like really early, so it's kind of that weird situation of getting into a relationship towards the end of the year. This guy, Brad, I guess, leads a very different life, and after spending the holiday with Alice's family, he decided to go home for Christmas, but did not invite her. She's unsure why, but she knows it kind of hurts. She feels like she introduced him to her family, so she was kind of open and honest in the relationship, but he didn't really reciprocate that when he had the chance, because I feel like a lot of couples do try to split their time with each other's families, so if they went to hers, you would think that she would be invited to go to his, but for some reason she wasn't, so that's kind of why she's just in a mood, because I think also a lot of her family, like her version of the lashes at the family get-togethers, is like, why is she not with her boyfriend if they're together? That's the questions that she's getting asked at her family gatherings. So after days of catching up, they spend virtually all the holiday home together, but kind of in secret. Although Alice suddenly remembers that Pat is always the person who knows her the best. She falls into like a Groundhog Day pattern of their hometown and spends their time together exactly how they used to spend it together when they were together. And she realizes that she's in Pat's bed, which is the warmest bed that she's ever known, that she's gonna go back to LA, which isn't where she was from, but that essentially lyric, I'll go back to LA with my so-called friends who write books about me, but then like this is the warmest bed she's ever known. So that's kind of the "'Tis the Damn Season" chapter. She essentially just realized that why she's still, I think, in my head that she was confident about her reasons to say no at the time, but just realized that it's kind of like right person, wrong time. Like they moved just too quickly, and if it would have kind of stayed slower, they would have been perfectly fine. So that's kind of where we're gonna leave the "'Tis the Damn Season" chapter. So now we're gonna move into actually one of my favorite tracks personally from the Evermore album, which is "Ivy," which I do have the Ivy lyrics pulled up just because I have to preface and say that some of the songs I'm only gonna pull little things from it just because it truthfully can't make sense in the short story if you really try. So this one's kind of about all the old widow goes. I'm not going to do any type of flash forward. I'm just going to take portions of what the song in general is about and apply it to my story. So I think it'll make a little bit more sense as we read through it, but just know that it's not like word for word trying to incorporate it. So Ivy is, though she has little regrets about her decisions over the holiday break, Alice can't help but feel guilty about her actions. Technically, I guess you could say she really didn't do anything wrong because as far as she knew, she did get invited to the holidays and it was kind of a new relationship, so she kind of thought this relationship was essentially over. Does it make it right? I don't know. It's kind of a gray area, but she still feels guilty, but also not really because it doesn't seem like it really affected anything. but those feelings when now her ex comes back to reconcile after the holiday apart. I don't really know Brad's reasoning. I think maybe he just needed a little time to, he also thought it was a little premature, but just realized that going home and not having her there was a mistake. So I'm not gonna go super deep into that, but that's where I think it comes back to just him wanting to get back together. So Alice kind of reluctantly agrees to go back into the relationship because it was something that she enjoyed until this weird break off when it came to the holidays. So she figured she could recapture that happiness and kind of distract herself from the whole Pat situation since she's back into her college life and Pat's not really someone that she could focus on considering they don't even live in the same town. So basically her decision is to kind of try to erase Pat again from her life. Though her life goes back to normal, she can't help but still think about Pat. One day she starts an open line of communication by thanking him for a gift that he had sent over to her house over holiday break. I don't think Pat was expecting to see Alice for the Christmas holiday or do what they did, so he was always trying to find a way to get back in her life. So regardless of them hanging out, he had already sent something to her house, just because he was hoping that would start a conversation, which only helped so many more because now that they've kind of hung out a little bit during the holidays, this gives her a reason to talk to him as well. So she does start that open line of communication by thanking him. The light conversations kind of turn into daily text, calls to the point of constant communication. I wouldn't say that it's super like we're getting back together. It's more just like being back in each other's lives, about hearing about each other's day-to-day life, and that just kind of like slowly escalates, if that makes sense. And then Pat obviously sees this as an open way to get back into her life and tries to take full advantage of it. I think the lyric that I'm referencing here is "Stop, your ivy grows," and I want to know which part with that is. Stop, you're putting roots in my dreamland, my house of stone, but your ivy grows and now I'm covered in you. And that's essentially what's happening to her. She's trying to get this person out, but he keeps growing like weeds. It just keeps coming back in every single time. And I think another reference with that is just, you know, make your decision. It's the goddamn fight of my life. She's trying to make this decision where she just doesn't know what the right thing to do is. She feels like she made that decision to leave him, so she should maybe leave that in the past. But at the same time, it's the person that knows her the best, and she just doesn't want him to be watching, you know, that husband's wine part. I don't remember where that's at, but, or dare to sit and watch what we come and drink my husband's wine. So that's kind of the frame point that I've gotten with this song. It's just, again, making decisions, and it's kind of leading into an affair because I feel like that's kind of what Ivy's about a little bit too. It's like she's trying to make sense of her situationship. So that's essentially what this is. It's just like putting Pat back in her life despite her best efforts. Culminating this is causing a rift in her new relationship by essentially blowing her life in the process, which is the goddamn fire that she can't stop. At this point, the current boyfriend, what was his name, Brad, doesn't really know about any of this, but this is more of like her internal struggles of like trying to figure out what she's gonna do from here. So that was our Ivy chapter, and now we're going to be moving to the Cowboy Like Me chapter. So Cowboy Like Me to me is a cat and mouse game where it's two people that find themselves in similar situations that don't want to admit their love for each other until they just realize that they are the same person, and then they just realize that this is all they've ever wanted and forever is the sweetest con. So that's where we're going with this. Right now, Alice is at this crossroads with two different people and she's trying to make her decision. So we start there where Alice is standing at the explosion of her And it starts where Alice is standing at the explosion of her life, blowing it up, but can't help but be happy with her decision. She's finally made the decision that she thinks that Pat will be the one that will ultimately make her happy. Though she's happy, she knows that this comes with its own fair scrutiny, which we'll get into a second. But because of this, she finds herself on a tightrope of constantly going back and forth of whether or not they should be together. And that's where I think the cat and mouse comes into play. I don't know the exact length of time for this, but I do think that every so often she's going to switch up because she hasn't broken up with the other person. And she's just like trying to really just itemize her feelings for the two people. And that's the cat and mouse game that they keep playing because Pat's not really playing a game, but she's the one that's playing the cat and mouse of trying to decide whether or not they should be together. I also included the scrutiny part because I think being a gold rush person that we talked about in the first part, the hometown always seems to find out things even if you're hundreds of miles away. So word's obviously going to get around that Pat and Alice are maybe getting back together, because I have a feeling that's because of Pat, because, you know, I feel like he can't keep those things to himself. But that's where I think the ladies' luncheon about when they passed through town, because their most recent back in town moment was over the holidays, and maybe it got out that they were kind of messing around with each other. Maybe people saw them out. That's where I think that comes through. But Alice and Pat essentially feel like outlaws given their choices that they made, because I do think eventually people find out that maybe Alice is in a relationship, and trying to find that gray line that I was mentioning a little bit earlier of like, was it right, was it not right? But they realize that the boots beneath your bed is the best thing, that they don't really care, that they have skeletons in their closets. Maybe she made the wrong decision, maybe she should have handled it a little bit differently, but that at the end of the day, they're just gonna justify in saying that all they wanted was love. Love is fair in war. I think it's just them finally making the decision to break off those relationships. And this is finally where it ends, why Alice making the decision to break up with Brad, and now she is fully ready to give her all to Pat again. The next chapter is going to start combining some tracks together. So we're gonna be combining Marjorie with Nobody No Crime, and stay with me, this is another one of those ones where there's only so little that could actually work for this story, so keep that in mind. Some time has passed now where Alice has graduated college. I want to say that when we left off, she was a junior, so this is probably less than a year later. But Alice and Pat are fully back together. She's graduated and she's returned to her hometown. They live together. I think she realized that she got that college experience that she was looking for, and she realized that she could make her career for what she went to back in her hometown. She never really had issues with her hometown. It was more just getting out there and seeing what is there. That way she could return to the hometown with the confidence of saying, I want to be here. And that's where she's find herself. Like, she's happy to be back, and they're actually going through some of the best times of their relationship. I didn't really write any new stories for them because this gets so long as it is, but they haven't talked about marriage again, but it's kind of the unsaid thing that they're in it for the long haul. I think Pat is tiptoeing around that just because he knows that was the catalyst for their breakup last time. So he's not going to be quick to bring this up. As long as she's back and with him, he's kind of happy with that for the moment in time. Another nick in the relationship armor is they are going through the best versions of their relationship, but Pat's grandma Marjorie unfortunately has fallen ill, and she has early set dementia, and her husband is her primary caretaker, so that's like his grandpa. So that's going to come into a little bit later. But I think if I would have written some more stories to fill the time with this, I think I would have prefaced Marjorie earlier and make her a little bit more focal point of Pat's life, just because they are very close. I'm going to try to establish that, but I think that would have made more sense to have her come in a little bit earlier. But regardless, they're very close. So the job of being a caretaker for his dementia wife has been very hard for the grandpa, so it doesn't seem like, so sometimes it doesn't seem like he really cares about her, because he kind of snaps when she doesn't remember things. Like, it's just something that he deals with all the time, and I don't know if anyone has that experience of dealing with someone with dementia. It just takes a lot of patience, and I think even the best people will get frustrated sometimes just because it's constantly kind of doing the same thing. So I think that's where a lot of people kind of see or perceive Grandpa as having faults, is because he doesn't feel like he cares as much because he's been doing this for like years. Even though he really does put in all the effort that he can, it just doesn't always seem like that. So something that happens with Marjorie is she is going to pass away, but before she does meet up with Alice just because she's back in the hometown, and she's always really liked Alice, and she gives Alice the infamous speech about standing her ground for certain things. I would like to think that the grandma did hear about the rumors that happened in Cowboy Like Me, so she kind of sits her down and just says, don't let people take advantage of you. You know, never be so kind, you forget to be clever. Never be so clever, you forget to be kind. But because of her dementia, I do think she kind of mixes those up in kind of like a sentimental way. But that's just essentially what happens there. And the only Nobody No Crime reference I could really bring in here was just going back to the grandpa's story of when she died, I think that he did it was just more, he was kind of relieved that she was gone. I don't think he moved on or any instance like that and had a mistress and actually killed her, but I don't think he was super sad. I think he was, just because he's like mourning the loss of the person, but he lost that person a long time ago. She died to him years ago before, when the dementia happened, so that's kind of where the no body, no crime reference has. I thought of it as like no body. Her body was there, but like her mind wasn't. So maybe it doesn't make sense, but that was the closest reference I was going to get there. So take it or leave it. That's what we got to work with. Now we're going to be moving into the tolerate it / it's time to go chapter. So with this one, the death of Marjorie has intense repercussions on the relationship, as it sends Pat into a very dark place in the sense that he no longer wants to work or even communicate any of his feelings, because we should have established earlier that she was a very big part of his life. It just sends him into some sort of spiral just of like time fleeting, and just he's never really had this experience, so it's really taking a toll on him, and he just started shutting people out. And this causes a strain on the relationship because Pat has always been the emotional person. If we remember back to chapters like Champagne Problems, he's been the one to jump too hard, fall in love too quickly. Like, he is the emotional person, so for him to be reserved, it's very weird. And not Alice's fault, but she doesn't really have any experience with death, so she kind of struggles to find a way to console him. Kind of where we get the tolerated lyrics, where it's like, I sit and watch you reading with your head low. I wake and watch your breathing. I notice everything you do or don't know. You're so much older and wiser. I wait by the door like I'm just a kid. I feel like that's Alice trying to break through his walls, and she just realizes that she can't. She has the battle hero's welcome. I just think overall this was like, where were you when we were building other worlds? I really like the lyric of, I made you my temple, my mural, my sky. Now I'm begging for footnotes in the story of your life. She made the sacrifice to come back home. She's back home, and they're having the best relationship, but unfortunately she doesn't blame him, but this is causing a rift for them, and now she's like begging to be let in, when all he wanted for so long was for her to be let in. So it's kind of just like coming back to this like weird full circle moment of like, they're always on the opposite page a little bit. One day Pat explodes and just abruptly breaks up with Alice because he needs to go clear his head without her constantly kind of like trying to help but not really helping. So he feels like the only way he can get through this is doing it alone. So that's kind of the it's time to go. Sometimes giving up is the strong thing. Sometimes to run is the brave thing. And it's not. In this situation, Pat is not doing the right thing, but he thinks it is, and that's kind of what matters here. So the it's time to go is more just him thinking that all he wanted was Alice, and he doesn't want to put that pain on her, if that makes sense. Like, he like respects and loves her too much that his way of solving this is by leaving, just because he doesn't want her to see him like this or have to struggle. He always thought she was better than him and too good for him. So this is just another thing that would kind of like bring her down, that he doesn't want to do. So in his own way, he's doing the right thing and the brave thing. But to most people, it's like, no, open up to your partner and let us work through this together. So then that's kind of what brings into the next chapter, which is closure. I think what happens here is there's going to be a couple months where she doesn't really hear from him, and they have a joint apartment, and she really doesn't know where he went, honestly. I would like to think that he went home or to his parents, but basically they just have not seen each other for a while, and she never really got the closure with her relationship because she doesn't know how to help, and she got the letter. She's doing better. I think this is exactly what happens here. And I like the I'm fine with my spite and my tears and my beers and my candles. I can feel you smoothing me over. I feel like it's coming across in the letter of him saying like exactly what I just said, that he didn't want to bring her down. It comes off not so great in a written version because she's probably scoffing at this, being like, but I never asked you to do that. Like, you made the assumptions that I wouldn't care or that I am too good for you. Like, that's all in your own head. So like, this closure isn't really gonna work because I never needed that type of closure. So it's kind of a short chapter, but that's essentially what we're here with closure. It's just kind of like, I don't need your letters, I don't need anything, I just need to understand why. And that's where we're gonna kind of leave closure off. And these are kind of starting to get very short just because I know where I want to end the story. The happiness chapter is actually pretty short just because Alice just finally accepts that it's time to move on and that she kind of gave him his space and he never really came back to it. So she's kind of just trying to maturely move on and just say, like, if it's meant to be, it'll come back to you. And the main line that I get out of that, and what do you do when a good man hurts you and you know that you've hurt him too? Because he hurt her by just abruptly leaving, and then she did the same thing, if you think about it, years ago with the marriage proposal. So she knows that this person's a good person and that they're always just somewhat on the wrong page, and it's really no one's fault. And that's exactly what happiness is. It's just there'll be happiness after you, but there was mostly happiness because of you. So that's kind of where the happiness chapter just brings us to. So now we're going into the second to last chapter, which is the Evermore chapter. This one is just kind of culminating with the same thing of time passing, gray November, I've been down since July. This is still processing the end of the relationship. She still really hasn't gotten that closure from the relationship. And she was catching her breath, staring out the window. I had a feeling so particular that this pain would be evermore. She just feels like that even if she got the closure, that this would be a lasting pain, just because she does feel like they were soulmates in some sort of life, and I think Pat feels the same thing. So they're kind of just always thinking that their pain will always be forever, just because, like, no matter who they love in the future, there will always be a missing piece of their heart just because it belongs with each other. But I would like to think that this is where they start to reconcile when it gets to kind of the bridge of the song, where they're kind of talking back and forth. Because, like, and when I was shipwrecked, I thought of you in the cracks of light. Can we just get a pause? I dreamt of you. I think this is really just the part for me that maybe it's not super close of a reference, that Pat realizes that he's had enough time to move on, and he realizes that he didn't do it maturely. Because I always thought that Evermore and the exile conversations of, like, coming to the realization of, like, I gave you so many signs and you didn't see the signs, similar to Evermore, where he actually does make this realization. They don't have this conversation, but he realizes that, again, she is the one, and this was something that he shouldn't have done. So this is where the chapter where I feel like he comes to reconcile with her, and it works. And I don't have much more to say with that, but obviously they get back together. And then the last chapter, which is long story short, I survived. And I would like to think the relationship does survive too, because now she has the right weapons if someone comes for them. It's mostly coming for each other, but they're always prepared for their relationship now. They've grown together, they've grown apart, they've done everything they need to kind of like have this strong relationship. And I would like to think that she says, past me, I want to tell you not to get lost in these petty things. Your nemesis will defeat themselves before you get the chance to swing. I just think that's kind of the perfect poetic ending, and I know I wrote this myself, so like I'm not trying to give myself a pat on the back, but that was my story. I hope you enjoyed this. I know this is very long-winded and it's probably very convoluted and probably just stupid, but I am happy to share with this. I hope you really enjoyed this because it has been very fun for me to make and write. So let me know what you think of the story. Let me know what you thought, but thank you so much, and I'll see you in our next video.